The paper was still warm from the printer, the black ink smelling of ozone and finality. I held the new price list for the Fisk Boulevard location, the glossy cardstock heavy in my hands, heavier than a simple piece of paper had any right to be. Each service, each price, was a brick in the wall I was building around myself. Gel manicure with art, $65. Full set, sculpted acrylic, $85. The bridal package, $225. These weren't just numbers, they were declarations of value, a language my husband Malik had refused to learn for 9 long years. He had a different name for it. He called it that little side hustle, a cute thing I did with my hands. And holding this paper, this proof of a future he had no part in, I finally understood. He wasn't diminishing my business. He was diminishing my world so his could look bigger. The warmth of the paper felt like the first ray of sun after a long, cold winter. My name is Zora. I'm 33 years old. Malik, my husband, was 38. We had been married for 9 years, together for 11. Long enough for the patterns to set in like concrete. I'm a business owner, a nail technician by trade, who built a salon from a tackle box of polishes on our coffee table into a thriving enterprise. I understand systems. I understand infrastructure. You can't build a salon on a weak foundation. The first sign of pressure and the whole thing cracks. A marriage, I've learned, is no different. It's a structure. It's meant to be load-bearing, a place where 2 people can distribute the weight of the world. For 9 years, I had been holding up the roof by myself, so focused on the strain in my own shoulders that I never noticed he wasn't just failing to help. He was piling more weight on top. The sentence that finally broke the structure wasn't shouted in anger. It wasn't delivered during a fight. It was tossed into the air as casually as a dirty sock aimed at a hamper. It was a Tuesday night in February, the kind of damp, chilly Nashville evening that makes you want to curl up on the couch. I had just gotten home, my back aching from 10 hours of leaning over a nail desk, my hands smelling faintly of acetone and lavender cuticle oil. But I was happy. We'd had our best Tuesday ever, every chair full, the sound of laughter and the whir of e-files filling the air. I walked into the living room, wanting to share the small victory with the person who was supposed to be my partner in all things. He was watching basketball, his feet propped up on the ottoman I'd reupholstered myself. He glanced up, his eyes flicking back to the screen before I'd even finished my sentence about the day's success. "That's great, baby," he said, his attention on a replay. Then, during a commercial break, he looked over at me, a lazy, indulgent smile on his face. "You're still doing that little side hustle? That's cute." Still, as if it were a phase I was supposed to have outgrown, like a teenager's garage band. Little, as if it didn't pay our car note and half the mortgage. Side hustle, as if it were something I did for pocket money instead of the thing I poured my heart, my dreams, and my formidable talent into every single day. Cute. The final, patting me on the head dismissal. 9 years of that same gentle, corrosive condescension. And in that moment, something inside me went perfectly, terrifyingly still. It wasn't a snap. It was the quiet, final click of a lock seating into place. The roof I'd been holding up didn't collapse. I just decided to set it down and walk out from under it. The archaeology of our marriage is littered with these tiny dismissals, each one a fossil of his insecurity. It began in our first apartment, when my business was just me and a rolling case full of supplies. I'd set up a portable table in the living room for my first few clients, friends, and their cousins who'd seen my work on social media. I was meticulous, transforming their nails into tiny works of art, and I was starting to build a real following. I remember creating my first ever price list, typing it out on our shared computer. A basic manicure was $20. A full set of acrylics was $40. I showed it to Malik, beaming with pride. He scanned it, his brow furrowed. "You're charging $40 for nails? Who's paying that?" It wasn't a question of genuine curiosity. It was a statement of doubt. It was the first time he'd suggested that the value I placed on my own work was inflated, unrealistic. The implication was clear. "You think you're worth that much?" I defended it, explaining the cost of supplies, the hours of training, the skill involved. He just shrugged, a little smirk playing on his lips. "All right, Z. Don't say I didn't warn you." But people did pay it. They paid it gladly. My client list grew so fast I had to start a wait list. The income from my little thing paid off my student loans and then started to build our savings. When I found a tiny, one-chair studio for rent in a Sola Salon suite, I knew it was the next step. I was terrified. It was real rent, real overhead. I needed his support, his encouragement. I showed him the listing, my hands shaking slightly. I'd already run the numbers a dozen times. It was feasible, just scary. He looked at the pictures, at my carefully prepared budget. "It's cute," he said, the word landing like a feather from a great height, soft and utterly dismissive. "Just don't quit your day job." I didn't have a day job. This was my job. He knew that. He saw me leaving at 8 in the morning and coming home at 8 at night, my body tired but my spirit on fire. But in his mind, it wasn't a real career. Real careers came with benefits and a 401k with a boss you could complain about. My entrepreneurship, my drive to build something of my own, was an amusing hobby that thankfully brought in some extra cash. He couldn't conceive of it as the center of my world because the center of our world was supposed to be him. His family amplified this perspective. Sunday dinners at his mother's house became a recurring, low-grade humiliation. His mother, his 2 sisters, and a rotating cast of cousins were some of my most demanding clients. They expected family discounts, which I gave, and last-minute appointments, which I squeezed in. They'd show off their nails at the dinner table, and the talk would inevitably turn to my salon. "Look what Zora did," his sister Brianna would say, wiggling her fingers, which I had spent 2 hours meticulously sculpting. "This nail lady money must be good." The table would laugh. It was a joke, of course, but it was a joke that always had me as the punchline. I was the nail lady, a quaint title that erased the CEO, the marketing director, the accountant, and the lead artist I had to be every single day. Malik would just laugh along, wrapping his arm around my shoulder. "She's got her little hustle, that's for sure," he'd say, as if presenting a talented pet. I'd just smile and refill their glasses of sweet tea, the condensation cold against my fingers. Inside, I was calculating the cost of the product I'd used on them for free. Calculating the income I'd lost by giving them priority appointments. Calculating the down payment for a second location, a dream that was growing more vivid and urgent with each passing month. That dream was the only thing that got me through those dinners. The thought of a place that was entirely mine, a testament to my skill and business acumen that was so undeniable, even they couldn't dismiss it. The dream had a physical address, an empty storefront on Fisk Boulevard, right near the university. It was perfect. The foot traffic was incredible, the space was bright and airy, and the rent was reasonable if I budgeted carefully. I found it 2 years ago. The first time I brought it up to Malik, I was practically vibrating with excitement. I had a full business plan, projected earnings, a vision for the clean, modern aesthetic. He listened, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he sighed, a heavy, burdened sound. "Zora, your first place is doing great. Why do you need more?" "It's not about need," I tried to explain. "It's about growth. It's the next step. I have to turn people away every day, Malik. The demand is there. But it's so much work. I don't want it consuming you," he said, framing his resistance as concern for my well-being. "We have a life. I want to see my wife. I don't want you married to a business." He made my ambition sound like a betrayal, as if my dream of expansion was a threat to our marriage, a selfish indulgence that would cost him something. We argued, but his arguments were circular and emotional. It would be too stressful. It was too risky. We were comfortable. Why rock the boat? Every reason was a veiled version of the same truth. He was comfortable with my success, as long as it stayed small enough to fit inside the box he'd built for it. A second location was a tangible, undeniable step out of that box. It was a level of success he couldn't patronize. So I let it go. I told myself he was right, that it was too soon. I told myself a good wife puts her marriage first. Every Thursday, I drove past the Fisk Boulevard location on my way to my supplier. For 6 months, the for lease sign mocked me from the window. Then it was gone. I felt a pang of such profound loss, it was like a physical blow. Someone else was living my dream. A year later, the tenant had moved out, and the sign was back up. A second chance. This time, I was more insistent. My business was even stronger, my savings more robust. I had proof of concept, a loyal clientele, and 2 talented nail techs I'd trained myself who were ready for more responsibility. This time, the argument was different. He didn't focus on the risk. He focused on me. "You're already so tired all the time," he'd say, his voice soft with faux sympathy. "I worry about you. This is going to run you into the ground." It was a masterful pivot. He wasn't the unsupportive husband. He was the caring protector. I was the one who was being reckless with my health, my energy, our peace. He contaminated my own ambition, making me feel guilty for wanting more. And again, I relented. I convinced myself that maintaining the harmony in my home was more important than the square footage of my business. The harmony, I see now, was just the absence of his discomfort. I passed that empty storefront every Thursday for 2 years. 2 years of telling myself, next year. 2 years of waiting for him to come around. I was waiting for permission to build my own empire from a man who was happy for me to have a small garden, as long as it stayed in his backyard. The most corrosive part of it all was how my invisible labor at home made his comfortable life possible. I managed our finances, paying the bills from our joint account, into which my side hustle deposited more and more each month. I handled the scheduling of our lives, from dentist appointments to his mother's birthday dinners. I was the buffer between Malik and the world's little annoyances. When his car needed repairs, I dealt with the mechanic. When his prescription needed a refill, I was the one on hold with the pharmacy. I created a frictionless existence for him, a home that was a sanctuary from stress, not because our life had no stress, but because I absorbed it all before it could reach him. I did it because I thought that was what love was, an act of service. I was the support system for his very important, very real job in logistics management. I made sure he had the peace and quiet to excel. It never occurred to him that my job, the one he considered a hobby, also required peace and quiet. It never occurred to him that while I was building his support system, no one was building mine. My success was treated as an anomaly, a happy accident that happened in spite of its own frivolity. His success was treated as the family's main objective, the thing we all had to organize our lives around. This pattern became painfully clear every tax season. I had a wonderful accountant, an older man named Mr. Henderson, who had been with me since I was just an LLC with a single-member designation. He'd seen my growth firsthand. Every March, we'd sit in his quiet, book-lined office and go over my numbers. Malik never came with me. He wasn't interested. He'd just say, "Just tell me what we owe, baby," as if my business were a slightly complicated lemonade stand. This March was different. I walked into Mr. Henderson's office feeling the weight of that side hustle comment from a few weeks prior. It had been sitting on my chest, a small, dense stone of resentment. I was quiet as Mr. Henderson laid out my profit and loss statements, my revenue growth charts, my expense reports. "Zora," he said, his voice gentle, "your growth is exceptional. You've built something truly remarkable here." I just nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. He saw the sadness in my eyes. He was a perceptive man. He'd handled our joint filings for years. He knew what Malik did, what he likely earned. Without saying a word, he pulled up Malik's W-2 from the file and my salon's final S-Corp profit statement for the year. He didn't do it to be cruel. He did it, I think, to be kind, to show me what he saw. He laid the two documents side by side on his polished mahogany desk, and there it was, in crisp black ink, undeniable and absolute. He slid the comparison across the desk. My number, the net profit from my little side hustle, after all expenses, salaries, and taxes were paid, was larger than his salary. It wasn't even close. I stared at the two numbers. His, a respectable figure from a stable corporate job. Mine, a figure born from acetone fumes, cramped shoulders, and the relentless belief in my own worth. A wave of something cold and sharp washed over me. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't glee. It was the icy, shocking clarity of a diver hitting a thermocline, passing from a warm surface layer into the deep, frigid truth below. For 9 years, he hadn't just been condescending. He had been wrong. Factually, demonstrably wrong. His assessment of my work's value was not an opinion. It was a falsehood. All the sacrifices, all the deferred dreams, all the times I'd made myself smaller to protect his ego, they were all based on a lie. The lie that his contribution was primary and mine was secondary. The paper on that desk was the truth. I thanked Mr. Henderson, my voice sounding distant and strange to my own ears. I gathered my documents, my hands moving with a slow, deliberate calm. I walked out of his office and into the bright March afternoon. I drove home without the radio on. The familiar streets of Nashville looked alien, as if I were seeing them for the first time. I replayed 1,000 moments in my mind. Every "it's cute," every little thing, every joke about nail lady money. They weren't just careless words. They were a strategy, a way to keep me in my place, to keep my success from eclipsing his. He hadn't been protecting me from stress. He'd been protecting himself from irrelevance. When I got home, the house was quiet. He wasn't back from work yet. I walked through the rooms that I had painted, the rooms filled with furniture I had chosen and paid for. I looked at the life we had supposedly built together and saw it for what it was. My project, which he had graciously allowed me to manage. He came home an hour later, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door with a familiar clatter. He loosened his tie, kissed me on the cheek without really seeing me. He didn't notice the stillness in my face or the way I didn't wrap my arms around him. He just saw what he expected to see. His wife at home, waiting for him. He walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and scanned its contents. "What's for dinner?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just stood there in the quiet of our living room and realized I was already gone. The decision, once made, was an exercise in logistics. My mind, so used to scheduling clients, ordering inventory, and managing payroll, simply reclassified my departure as a new project. Project: liberation. Timeline: 2 weeks. Budget: ample. I started the next day. During my lunch break, I called the leasing agent for the Fisk Boulevard property. My voice was steady, professional. I asked if the space was still available. It was. I made an appointment to see it that afternoon. Standing in the empty, sunlit space, surrounded by the ghosts of my deferred dreams, I didn't feel sadness. I felt a quiet, thrilling sense of homecoming. I signed the lease before I left, using my business's federal tax ID number. The entire transaction was in my name, my company's name. It was the first major decision I had made in years without filtering it through the fine mesh of his potential disapproval. Next came the apartment. I found a beautiful one-bedroom in Germantown, a neighborhood I'd always loved, with a balcony overlooking a courtyard. I signed that lease online from my salon's office, the click of the mouse the only sound in the room. The preparations became a secret, second life. I lived in our home, performing the familiar rituals of our marriage. I made dinner. I asked about his day. I sat beside him on the couch while he watched basketball. But inside, I was somewhere else. I was mentally packing boxes, arranging furniture in my new apartment, interviewing potential new hires for the second location. The dramatic irony was thick enough to taste. He was living in the last days of his comfortable reality, and he had no idea. One night, he wrapped his arms around me while I was washing dishes, burying his face in my hair. You smell good," he murmured. "Things have been good lately, haven't they? Quiet. Nice." I froze for a fraction of a second, the dishcloth in my hand dripping soapy water into the sink. I had just transferred the security deposit for my new life from my business account. I turned in his arms and gave him a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Yes," I said. "Quiet." His obliviousness was my shield. He saw my late nights at the salon as business as usual, not as me packing my personal files and office supplies. He saw me on my laptop in the evenings and assumed I was ordering supplies or answering client emails, not comparing moving companies and forwarding my mail. He did not see me because he had not truly looked at me in years. He saw the role I played, dutiful, supportive wife with a cute hobby, and as long as I performed the role, he didn't need to look any closer. The final week was the hardest. The intimacy felt like a lie, a performance I was giving to an audience of one. Every "I love you" from him landed like a stone in my gut. He wasn't lying. He did love me, in his way. He loved the woman who managed his life, who admired his career, and whose own ambitions were small and manageable enough not to threaten him. He had no idea that woman had ceased to exist the moment I saw those 2 numbers on Mr. Henderson's desk. The day I chose for the move was a Friday. He had an all-day series of meetings and wouldn't be home until after 7. I booked the movers for 10 a.m. When I woke up that morning, I felt a profound, unnerving peace. I made us coffee, just like always. He talked about his upcoming meetings, the stress, the pressure. I listened, nodding in all the right places, my mind a million miles away, running through a checklist, boxes labeled, movers confirmed, utilities for the new place activated. He kissed me goodbye at the door. "Have a good day at your little shop," he said affectionately. It didn't even sting anymore. It was just a line from a script he no longer knew I had thrown away. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I began to move. I worked with the methodical efficiency of a salon owner flipping a room for the next client. There was no rage, no tearful breakdown. It was a simple, unhurried extraction. My life from his. The movers were professional and quick. They emptied the closets of my clothes, the bookshelves of my books, the office of my desk and chair. The house grew emptier, more echo-filled. They took the couch I'd bought, the dining table I'd refinished, the art I'd chosen for the walls. I was not stripping the house bare to punish him. I was simply taking what was mine, what I had paid for with the profits of my side hustle. By 3 o'clock, they were gone. I was left standing in the strangely spacious house. It looked like the day we moved in, full of potential and someone else's memories. I walked through the rooms one last time. There were no scorched earth gestures, no angry notes. The consequence of my departure was not in what I did, but in the simple, gaping absence of what I used to do. His frictionless life was about to encounter friction. My final act was the only one that felt like a statement. In the hallway, there was a large framed photo from our wedding day. Us, smiling, young, unaware of the slow erosion to come. I took it down from the wall, the hook leaving a small naked hole in the drywall. I didn't smash the frame or tear the photo. I just leaned it gently against the wall on the floor. He could do with it what he wanted. Then, I took out the new, laminated price list for the Fisk Boulevard location. The one I had been holding that day, the one that smelled like the future. I used the same nail that had held our marriage and hung the price list in its place. It was centered perfectly, a testament to my real value in the place where my supposed value to him used to hang. It was a menu of my services, a declaration of my worth, and a receipt for my freedom. I left my house key on the now empty kitchen counter, next to the coffee maker I'd left for him. I took one last look around, not at what I was leaving, but at the clean, open space ahead of me. Then I walked out the front door and closed it quietly behind me. I didn't lock it. It wasn't my house anymore. The phone started vibrating around 7:15. I was on the floor of my new apartment, eating pizza out of a box and surrounded by my belongings, when the first call came. I looked at the screen. Malik. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text. Where are you? I took another bite of pizza. It was the best I'd ever tasted. Another text. The house is empty. What the hell is going on? Then another call. Voicemail again. The text started coming faster, a frantic staccato of digital panic. Zora, call me. This isn't funny. Where is all our stuff? Did we get robbed? The suggestion was so absurd I almost laughed. Yes, Malik, you were robbed. Of a live-in chef, a bookkeeper, a personal assistant, and a full-service therapist. The first voicemail came through. His voice was tight with confusion and growing anger. Zora, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it needs to stop. You're being childish. Whatever I did, this is a massive overreaction. Call me. Now. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what was wrong. He immediately framed my action as an immature game and my reason as an overreaction. He was already managing the narrative, casting me as the unstable one. I deleted the voicemail without finishing it. I put my phone on silent, letting the screen light up with his escalating panic. I unpacked my books, arranging them on the shelves, creating order out of the chaos of the boxes. An hour later, curiosity got the better of me. I had a dozen missed calls and over 30 texts. They traced a perfect map of his emotional cascade. The anger and accusation phase was predictable. You are the most manipulative person I have ever met. After everything I've done for you? This is how you thank me? By just disappearing? Then came the bargaining. The false remorse was so transparent it was almost sad. Okay, baby, I'm sorry. For whatever it is, just come home. We can talk this out. I'll listen, I promise. We can even talk about the second location. I'll support you, whatever you want. The offer landed with a dull thud. Support was not something you offered as a hostage negotiation tactic. It was something you gave freely during the struggle, not after you'd lost all your leverage. I thought about responding, but my silence was a more powerful answer than any words I could have written. My silence communicated that the negotiation was over. The assets had already been liquidated. The raw vulnerability I was expecting didn't arrive until the next morning. It came in a single text, sent at 3:14 a.m. I saw the price list on the wall. I don't get it. That was the most honest thing he'd said. He truly didn't get it. He didn't understand that the price list wasn't an act of aggression, it was a correction to the record. I finally decided to respond. One time, he called as I was brewing coffee in my new kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the window. I answered. Zora. Oh, thank God. He sounded exhausted. Baby, what is this? I've moved out, Malik. I said it quietly, a simple statement of fact. But why? Without talking to me? Without anything? We have been talking about this for 9 years, I said, my voice even. You just weren't listening. That's not fair, he said, his voice rising in desperation. I always believed in you. The lie was so bald, so audacious, it almost took my breath away. It was the last desperate gambit of a man trying to rewrite history in real time. No, I said, and I set my coffee cup down on the counter before speaking again, anchoring myself in the solid reality of my new life. You were amused by me. Then came the line I knew was coming, the one that revealed the chasm between his perception and my reality. I was joking, he said, his voice cracking. All that stuff about the side hustle. You know I was joking. You know I always supported your little thing. He still called it a little thing. Even now, in the midst of the wreckage, with the evidence of its power hanging on his empty wall, he still couldn't bring himself to give it its proper name. He couldn't call it an empire. He couldn't call it my life's work. He could only see it in relation to himself. Little. I didn't try to argue. I didn't list my grievances. The time for that was long past. Who is we? I asked quietly. He was silent. The question hung in the air between us. Who was the we he kept referencing? The we whose life my ambition was threatening. For years, we had been a corporation with one primary shareholder, and I was finally cashing out my stock. He had no answer. I have to go, Malik, I said. And before he could reply, I ended the call. The months that followed were a blur of productive, joyful work. The Fisk Boulevard location, the Zora Salon, Suite B, was a dream realized. I designed it myself, with clean white walls, gold accents, and lush green plants in every corner. The smell of fresh paint and possibility was intoxicating. I hired Maria, a wonderfully talented nail artist I had trained at my first location, to take the second chair. Seeing her greet her first client in the new space was a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. It was a vindication that had nothing to do with Malik and everything to do with me. I hadn't just built a business. I was building a community. My new life took shape in small, quiet moments. The first time I bought groceries and realized I only had to buy the brand of coffee I liked. The pleasure of stretching out diagonally across my own queen-sized bed. The silence of my apartment, a silence that wasn't empty, but full of peace. I was learning to order for one, to cook for one, to exist as a singular noun after years of being part of a collective pronoun that had never truly included me. I saw him once, about 6 months later. I was in a coffee shop in the Gulch, waiting for my order. He walked in, and for a moment, my heart did a strange little flip, a muscle memory of a life I no longer lived. He looked ordinary, smaller than I remembered, no longer magnified by the space he took up in my home. He looked tired. He saw me, and his eyes widened for a second. There was no anger on his face, just a sort of weary resignation. He gave me a small, tight nod. I nodded back. The barista called my name, and I picked up my latte and walked out, the little bell on the door jingling behind me. There was no bitterness, no lingering anger, just the calm, quiet distance you feel when you look at a photograph of a place you used to live. It's a funny thing, building a life. You think it's about partnership, about two people laying bricks side by side. But sometimes you realize you're the only one with a trowel in your hand, while the other person is busy telling you how quaint your little wall is. For years, I thought love meant enduring the weight of his comfort. I thought my job was to absorb the impact of his insecurities, to keep my own light dim enough that it didn't cast his in shadow. I learned the hard way that you cannot call something a side hustle and then expect to be a majority shareholder when it becomes an enterprise. You don't get to belittle the work and then claim the rewards. The ultimate vindication wasn't the number on that piece of paper in Mr. Henderson's office. That number wasn't a weapon, it was a key. It unlocked a door I hadn't even realized was closed. The real peace came from walking through it. It came from the quiet hum of the ventilation in my new salon, the satisfied sighs of my clients, the knowledge that I was finally living in a structure I had built to last, on a foundation that was entirely my own. I had finally stopped trying to renovate a house that was never built for me and had instead designed my own home from the ground up. My world is not small. It is not a side project. It is not cute. It is mine. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.